Well, here we are, folks. Another Saturday, and I'm Bob Gumbs, your host with the Concerned Forum. And today, I didn't want to have a guest because I have some things that I wanted to voice. Of course, we've all heard about the, how should we say, the excitement that took place in Nevada at the Democratic caucus. Now, I have a couple of things I want to cover, and I'm going to try to be careful because at first it might sound like I'm trying to throw a bunch of disjointed subjects together. Well, maybe in a way I am, but I think that one of the things that we have to wake up to in this country is the fact that a lot of these subjects that might seem disjointed, they're related. They are related. Now, to start off with, let me put my little 2 cents in here. First of all, in a democratic form of government, that means that everyone that's eligible, and by eligible we mean you are 18 years old, you are an American citizen, and boom, that makes you eligible to vote. We don't have a test on, like, are you a high school graduate? Do you have an associate's degree or a bachelor's or a master's? Do you score a certain amount on an IQ test? I don't know. When I look at what's happened to the Republican Party, no, I'm just kidding. But we don't have that. And we especially don't have a test for religious qualifications. That's unconstitutional. Our Constitution strictly forbids that. And I put that out especially to my evangelical friends in the South. When we have these things called primaries, and every state has a primary, I think the question has to rise, closed primaries. Is that really democratic? In other words, here in New York State, the Democratic Party is having the opportunity, supposedly, to choose who will be their standard bearer in the various elections. Could be presidential, gubernatorial, senatorial, congressional, what have you. Well, as we stand here and look back upon our history, we've seen many things that might have been accepted at one time, which we now find abhorrent today. Very easy example, slavery. As a matter of fact, slavery was protected in the Constitution originally. It took a civil war to get that not only unprotected and illegal. I think that we are at the time now where we have to look at this thing about the closed primary. Now, of course, dedicated party insiders will say, well, hey, we're the Democratic Party. We have a right to choose who we want. Okay, we're talking about a presidential election coming up in November. So you're going to have some folks on the inside of the party saying, talking about the Democrats now, saying, well, hell, it's our party. We want to pick Joe or Jane Blow to be our standard bearer. And we have a right to do that. We're registered Democrats. It's our party, and we'll do what we want to. Well, actually, more and more, you can sit down and you can actually look and see that that's not democratic. Um, what about independents? What about Republicans? What about people who for so long, for a very long time, have been discouraged about the political process? Just talking about the state now, who for so long have been discouraged by the political process that they've said, well, the hell with it. I'm not even going to be bothered. What about those categories of people now I just mentioned? I'm discouraged, I don't give a damn, Republicans, independents. They're all American citizens also. That's why I think the first thing at the convention in Philly this summer that needs to happen is that we basically put it on the table and the closed primary. Why? Because it might be your party, but it's our country also. And no one political party should have the right to basically ramrod someone who they feel should be president of the United States. What about the rest of the people in this state? Shouldn't they have a voice? And of course, someone will say, well, if they want a voice, then let them register as Democrats. I don't see anywhere in our Constitution where it says, hey, if you want to be a full-fledged citizen, then you got to register in the political party. As a matter of fact, political parties are not even protected in the Constitution. It was frowned upon. The whole concept of political parties is something that developed over a period of time, starting with Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton, John Adams, Madison, what have you, over a period of time. You know, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. And I think what we're seeing this year is that this whole concept of the two parties is something that has grown way out of control. And it needs to be stopped. What we really need to do, we need to get into the machinery of government. And it seriously needs to be recalibrated. You know, sometimes with machinery, as I learned when I was in the Navy, if you don't recalibrate a specific piece of equipment, eventually the whole damn thing is going to break down. And I think that that's what we're in danger of now. Now, let me say that I am a registered Democrat. Basically, I have been one since I was about 5 years old. Okay? Now, there have been times in my life, I think for about a year, something like about 14 or 15 months, I dealt with the Republican Party. I even ran for Congress under that label when I was living in Baltimore. And did pretty damn good, too. Didn't win, but it was a good experience. The problem was that I got involved because I thought I saw some beams of light, as it were, from the Republican Party of my dad, and I was severely mistaken. The whole Southern strategy thing had really just seeped itself so deeply into the party that, I said, this is beyond hope. I'm going to basically just ease off of politics for a while. And so I went to the Green Party. And I was with the Green Party for about a good, what, 3 years, a little bit over 3 years. And oddly enough, in '07, with the advance of Barack Obama, I actually saw myself going back to being a Democrat again. And the reason for that was not because he was an African American, but, well, you remember, those of you who are old enough can really remember when Obama first ran. He actually sounded like he made sense in comparison to the opposition. And that's what I wanted to be a part of. I basically spent all whatever free time I had at the campaign headquarters in Harlem for Obama. And I was happy to do it. Now, do I still feel that way towards the president? Oh, well, personally, I think he's a great guy. Unlike some of my friends in the South, I don't think that he is the Antichrist. And I think that he has, he's put out a few good pieces of progressive legislation, or at least attempted to. But there are other things about now President Obama that I really have some sincere problems with. But let's put that on the shelf for the time being. Getting back to this subject about party primaries, I think that they need to be open. I think that as Democrats, we are supposed to be the ones who are always at the forefront of progressive change. And to see Democrats snarling and clinging to the old levers of power, which is really all closed primaries represent, okay? Let's not be naive. If you're running for president, if you're running for Congress, you're running for a good-sized office. Believe me, you have to get the blessing of the poobahs, honchos, however you want to frame it. Open primaries can give the citizens an opportunity for choice. And I'm very sad when I see people who are supposed to be in the party that stands for progressive change acting like Republicans. Okay, that hurts me. Now, another point that needs to be brought out, and remember, just like I say, I run this show on the basis of transparency, and I don't run it because I'm trying to win a popularity contest with certain people or certain groups. I think that we have too much of that on the, quote, mainstream media as it stands now. I think that what the DNC, the party bosses, as it were, I think that this attempt of theirs to ram Hillary Clinton down the base of the party's throats, I think it was a mistake. Okay? See, I'm one black man that I happen to find many of the things that the Clintons have done questionable. They've done some good things. Don't get me wrong. I'm not in favor of these people that they want to lynch the Clintons. All right, no, I don't get into that. But calling it straight off the shoulder, Uh, I'm not pleased, and many of the people in the base are not pleased. Hillary was for a $12 an hour minimum wage. Uh, Bernie, and I also, under the name of transparency, I also have to say that I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter. So we got that out the way. Um, Bernie is fighting for a $15 an hour wage. Um, Hillary is in favor, or at least she started out being in favor, of these wacky trade treaties that put Americans out of work. Bernie is against those, that sort of thing. I wasn't too much in favor. I wasn't, as a matter of fact, I wasn't in favor at all of what Hillary did as Secretary of State. I don't believe that what we did to Gaddafi in Libya, I think that that was a horrible mistake. I'm not carrying any brief for Muammar Gaddafi, okay? He was a dictator, okay? Big deal. Um, since the turn of the last century, we have supported dictators around the planet. So that's not good enough to basically upset a part of the world. I just don't buy into that. She signed, as a U.S. Senator, she signed on to that stupid, illegal, wasteful war against Iraq, which basically blew out the Middle East. It created the huge problems that we're dealing with now. So I don't agree with her foreign policy, and many of our base in the Democratic Party, we don't agree with her foreign policy. It seemed, from everything I've read so far, that in the Obama regime or administration, Hillary was the one that was always breaking the glass. You know, the glass where you got the little axe and whatnot, in case of fire, break glass. Well, Hillary was always breaking the damn glass. And I don't agree with that. I don't think it's good for the nation. I don't think it's good for our party. I don't think it's good for the military. Let me say this, that I'm not trying to say that claim that I'm an expert in foreign policy. However, briefly, I served in the Army when I was a kid during Vietnam. Several years later on, I went back into the military, into the Navy, and I served on board 2 aircraft carriers, USS Nimitz and the USS Saratoga, attached to a F-18 fighter squadron, VFA 81. And I also spent close to 5 years at the White House and at the Pentagon doing top secret work. I was an intelligence technician, and I was assigned to the Defense Intelligence Agency, better known as DIA. So while I don't claim to be an expert on American foreign policy, I do think I know a little of what I speak, of what I'm talking about, which, from what I've seen so far among presidential candidates, that puts me at the head of at least the guy in the opposition, Mr. Trump. But again, that's for another situation. But when I said I don't hold any brief for Gaddafi, I mean that sincerely. I was in a situation where the guy tried to kill me twice. Um, During the 80s, it seemed that President Ronald Reagan's favorite pastime was sending the Nimitz over to the Gulf of Sidra, um, trying to prove to Gaddafi that the strip of water right in front of his house was really international waters. So as you can imagine, that caused some problems. But after all those times, Gaddafi really calmed down. Um, he basically pushed away from trying to obtain weapons of mass destruction. And he was more interested in the internal developments on the African continent. Maybe that's what caused him to get killed. I've read essays speaking to both things. The fact that he was basically trying to make Africa self-sufficient. Okay. And again, like I say, was he a dictatorial ass? Oh, most definitely, most assuredly. But then what about Saudi Arabia, where their favorite pastime is the lopping off of heads? Yeah, I know you're going to talk about ISIS. Believe me, Saudi Arabia, they lop off a hell of a lot more heads, or have lopped off a hell of a lot more heads than ISIS. Okay, but see, that's a hit on the American mainstream media, because Americans really don't know, generally speaking, what the hell's going on in the world. And it's sad, really. I mean, if you have the opportunity to listen to or look at news coming out of Britain or France or Europe in general, I find that you educate yourself a hell of a lot more than if you just sit up looking at the mainstream media all the time. But again, getting back to the problems we have in the Democratic Party, I don't understand how it is that you're going to take the second most unpopular person in American political life and have this person for your standard bearer. I don't get that. Not to mention the fact that, Bernie goes out there, he gets versus Hillary. She has a rally, a few hundred people show up, and Bernie has a rally. And, well, right here in New York at Central Park. And I will tell you something else, that I don't like to take anything personal when it comes to politics. That's a big problem that we have now in the United States. Our politics is definitely ethnic, racial, personal. And that's not a good way to discuss business. But that's what's happened. And see, I feel that Hillary contributed to that when she basically went down south, when they had all the southern primaries, and was basically saying, "Hey, look at my black folks. These folks are my firewall." And the truth of the matter is, you have millions of black people that support Bernie Sanders. His national spokesperson is a very charming, attractive black lady from Ohio, I believe a former state senator. Yet, the media, and see, this is again about this mainstream media, they will portray Hillary as being the crusader for black people. I find that a bit condescending, and I also find that dangerous. I feel very let down that so many of the black clergy, especially in the South, and our black elected officials basically encouraged that type of thinking, that type of behavior. Because basically what you're doing, you're taking your community and you're saying, hey, we're helpless. We're not saying as adult, mature American citizens, well, I'm going for so-and-so, I like the views on A, B, C. It's like, oh, well, Missy Hillary is going to take care of us poor colored folk. That's the impression I get. You, or I should say, the Hillary Clinton camp, they had almost gotten to the point where they were starting to say that Bernie and his crew were, if not anti-black, then at least, how should we say, suffered from an inability to converse with black people, which is a lie. Now, the Hillary camp didn't do that. They didn't come out saying that, you know, Bernie really is estranged from African Americans. They didn't say that. They were coming damn close. Okay, when you start looking at the, you know, at the point in this contest where people were starting to take Bernie seriously, that's when they were really starting to try to sock it to Bernie, saying that, oh well, he can't relate to urban America. You know, urban meaning us, black people, and Latinos. And see, that's the kind of crap, me personally, I detest. I truly do. Bernie has been in the fight, practically from the time Bernie was Bernie, okay? He's one of those people that I would say, and also I tip my hat to a fellow native New Yorker, you know, Bernie being from Brooklyn, although I'm from Harlem and Manhattan. And of course, you know, we have a little Manhattan-Brooklyn thing, but we're fellow native New Yorkers. And Bernie, being Jewish and having relatives that he lost, his family lost because of Hitler's Holocaust in Europe, he clings to that memory of the persecuted and the oppressed. And quite frankly, I feel I have a hell of a lot more in common with Bernie Sanders than I do with Hillary or Bill Clinton. Someone in the African American community sometime back, you know, gave Bill Clinton the title, you know, honorary black guy or first black president, which is nonsense. You know, that also gets to the point that I think is, you know, very troublesome within the black community. This idea, why? Because a white guy comes on an Arsenio Hall show and plays the saxophone. And, you know, you're going to, oh, I love this guy. You know, well, think of the crime bill, okay? Think of the promise to, you know, end welfare as we know it and all this good stuff. And think of the millions of black women and children that suffered under the Clinton policies, which the Clintons themselves even apologized for. So I'm gonna let, you know, let's just let it go with that. Now, the DNC basically wanted this whole thing to be a coronation for Hillary. And that was wrong. That was damn wrong. And Bernie is right. Now, the folks down in Nevada throwing chairs, and some people acting thuggishly, making terrible phone calls, threatening phone calls. That's wrong. You don't have a right to do that to anyone. You don't have a right to hurt anyone. That's not what we as Democrats, or if you just want to call yourself a progressive, Democrats, progressives, we're not about that. That whole violence thing, and that threatening phone call thing. We save that for the other guys. That's their thing. That's the other side. We don't do that. However, the idea that you're going to have a fixed primary right in front of people's faces, and you do this. I mean, I don't see. This is what's bugging me out. How in the hell do you think you're going to do this kind of thing, right in front of everyone's face, and you don't expect people to get angry? It's just like the law out here in the streets. Guys walking down the street minding his own business, and somebody walks up and says, "Hey, you know what I did with your mother last night?" And the guy belts him in the mouth. Is the guy wrong for belting him? Sure. But the guy who made the comment, if he's an adult, he knew what the hell he was doing. He knew that he was going to do something which would call for a very bad reaction. And that's what the DNC did. The lack of primary debates, right? Why else would you do that? It's like you were trying to stifle the process by which people think and reach their own conclusions. You got this crazy thing set up with super delegates. What the hell is a super delegate? Somebody that couldn't make it is Superman. So what? You make him still super. You make him Batman, and you call him a super delegate? That's silly. We know where this all comes from. This stems from, in the first place, this stems from back in the 80s and going into the 90s when the DNC, the Grand Poobahs, were so scared that you would have Jesse Jackson or someone like him basically actually talking about what a Democrat is supposed to be, and the powers that be in the DNC have always been so threatened by that. They came up with, they developed these kooky, crazy rules and regulations. The Southern Leadership, Southern Leadership Conference, that Clinton was a part of, all this kind of nonsense. Bottom line, it's about stifling the desires of the base of the party. And you see what happened with the Republican Party. Now, we're supposed to be a little more smarter, a little more humane, okay? A little more concerned about fairness and respect. And I think maybe that if the DNC, if the powers that be, would start to exhibit some respect for Bernie, not just for Bernie, but for his people, for us, his followers, and do things with a lot more transparency, I think a lot of the temperature would start to go down, and we could concentrate on what really needs to happen in the American body politic, and that is rejecting this guy, Donald Trump. Now, I'm going to tell you, there's only been a few times in my life when I was really afraid. See, I don't see being afraid as the same thing as being scared. Scared is like a physical thing. You think you might go into combat, you're scared. Whatever happens, boom, done. Being afraid, to me, it's like a constant nagging type fear. Like that you might have some horrid disease or something of that nature. Now, I can't speak for anyone else. That's my own personal definition of those two words. Now, there's been only a couple of times in my life when I've been afraid. And I hate to say it, this is one of them, because I'm very afraid for the future of my country. I'm afraid for these kids out here. I'm afraid for, like, when I, get on the subway or the bus and I see, mom or dad or, both of them, pushing the little baby carriage, and they got to take Junior or little Lisa out of the carriage, and dad or whoever is there to help folds up the carriage. I've been through that. That's one of my fondest, some of my fondest memories. And I look at the little baby in mom or dad's arms, and I say to myself, I wonder what the hell kind of future are they going to have? I recently became a grandfather. My daughter blessed me with a grandson. I don't know, maybe eventually I think my son will hopefully do likewise. We'll see. These kids now, they have to chart their own course. But I think about the future, and I look at what we have done, what we have allowed to happen, to transpire in this country. And I ask myself, how in the hell did we get to the point where we have the two most, I don't like to use the term hate or hated when referring to a fellow human being. But hey, gang, that's what we got here. The two most hated people in American politics running for the most important office on the planet. I find that scary. I find it so scary that I'm at the point now that it's starting to look like, oh God, I hate saying it. I don't even want to go there, but we have to go there because it's what's happening. There's no winners here. That's what it looks like. And there won't be any winners unless the people at the grassroots level, and I know we've all heard this BS before about, you got to get involved, blah, 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 blah. Well, unfortunately, this is one of those times, like the boy who cried wolf. And remember, he always kept doing that BS. Yeah, the wolf was out to get me, blah, 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 blah. And there was no wolf. Well, guess what? This is the time. The wolf is here. Not only is he at the door, he's already inside the house. He's sitting in the nice lounge chair, watching TV and kicking back. And what we have to figure out is how we're going to get him the hell out of here. That's the question. Now, I'm very concerned when you have a guy running for president of the United States and he is publicly, no hiding behind corners, none of that Lee Atwater bullshit, okay? Publicly getting the support of the head of the Ku Klux Klan, of all the various Aryan national, white nationalistic groups. That's scary. Now, another thing I wanted to bring up, in line with this situation, America, and see what I'm saying, we need to be real. We have a tremendous problem with class. We have a tremendous problem with race. Has it gotten better? Yeah, it has improved. Of course it has. I'm able to sit up here and do this and take what I'm doing here and send it around the world, across the country. Yeah, it's gotten somewhat better. But see, we're at the point now when certain groups of people, they feel so threatened that they are willing to push us backwards into the dark ages. Quite literally, the dark ages. Because I don't know, they're so crazy. It's just like this whole thing about, I call it the West Virginia mentality, right? Now, we know West Virginia. West Virginia contains some of the most poorest white folks in the country. God bless them. And a lot of people don't know this, but the whole thing that the conservatives and Republicans laugh at about, oh yeah, LBJ and his war on poverty, ha ha ha. Well, guess what? The war on poverty didn't start with LBJ, just like the Civil Rights Bill. But what he did, he was the one that carried it across the line for the touchdown. He carried the ball on both of those issues. The war on poverty really came about when Bobby Kennedy, his brother's campaign manager, John Kennedy's campaign manager, when they were going through West Virginia. And he saw the white poverty. He saw the black poverty too. But that white poverty, that really struck him. Because unfortunately, like most folks in America, when you talk about poverty, you think about black people. When you talk about drug addiction, you think about black and Latino people. It's just here lately that America as a whole now is not so surprised when you talk about poverty, when you talk about crime, when you talk about drug abuse, that you can also show a white face. When Bobby saw that poverty, remember, we're talking like, what, 59, 60. They said something has to be done about this. That's how the war on poverty originated. It didn't start because LBJ just wanted to give stuff to black folks, okay? As the Pat Buchanans of the 60s were trying to say, in order to bring about the Southern strategy for the Republican Party. It was about white poverty. And what Bobby came to the realization was that you have to basically deal with poverty on the whole, not just white poverty or black poverty, but poverty in this country, period. Many white folks in the rural South have started to benefit from the war on poverty. But see, the right wing doesn't talk about that. Now, we have this problem in this country. I don't know if it's, oh God, how do you phrase it? I had written down something, a word. If I'm a working class white person, right? And this is something that's always freaked me out. And I used to ask guys this, because that's one of the benefits of spending a good deal of time in the military in this country. You have a chance to mix with all kinds of people. And I spent a lot of time in the South. My late wife was from the South, was from Virginia, Southern Virginia. And I was been stationed in Mississippi, North Florida. Oh, which actually led to my leaving active duty with the Navy because of the anti-Semitism that I found in the unit that I had been assigned to. And after spending almost 5 years in the Pentagon and the White House, I just, something inside of me just rebelled against, hearing the, redneck hate speech against women officers and people of the Jewish faith. I just got, well, that's a whole personal thing. But that's how I came to leave the Navy. I just got tired. And I left the Navy just to let people know. And I went from active duty to the Naval Reserve, which you used to call Weekend Warrior. And then from there, I decided to go back to the Army, so I went in the Army Reserve. So it was just that the battles that I had fought, I had practically fought them by myself. With the help of the new commanding officer, who, when he first came to the squadron, that fighter squadron I had mentioned, he was the executive officer. And he worked with me while he was the exec, and he really worked with me after he became the CO. But I was just too tired. I regret that I left when I did. I always will. But that was just an example. See, the thing about American racism that is so insidious is that many times it's not just, a physical battle. It just drains you. It drains people spiritually, emotionally. And that's what had happened to me. But getting back to the other point that I was making, this idea that if Joe gets half of a ham sandwich, then I, Bill, am not going to have anything to eat. And that's not the way it works. But unfortunately, in this country, with the help primarily of the Republican Party and their Southern strategy, the message that they have been putting out to the white working class is that if you help that black guy or that Latino guy with a program where he'll get a meal when he's in kindergarten, and you got a program set up to help him academically through grade school and high school, and you try to get some kind of grant thing going for him so he or she can get into college, that somehow that decreases you somehow. Somehow that devalues you as a white guy. And that's the main problem that we've had in this country. That's why we've had such a problem in terms of the rest of the Western world, in terms of maintaining an efficient and humane social safety net. And that's why, to be quite frank, in comparison with the rest of the Western world, we have a pretty damn ignorant population, working class population. I've been all through Europe. Believe me, generally speaking, people are a hell of a lot brighter over there than they are here, because they don't have this constant thing about, well, I got to stop these black and brown people and these Native American people from getting anything from the government, because I deserve stuff, but they don't. And what happens in the end, none of us get a damn thing. And all of us, our quality of life just steadily inches down bit by bit. That's what the Republican Party has come to stand for in this country. And it's a disgrace. That is done primarily because of greed. It's like the masses of the universe here in the United States, okay? The people that control things, basically, what they do, they put out this race thing, these social issues, and, well, I don't want to make a wedding cake for this SOB because he's gay. And they got us so busy clawing at each other. Meanwhile, they're walking away from the table with the huge tax breaks and all this other good stuff, and the beautiful little gated communities. And meanwhile, for the masses of working people in this country, the quality of life is continuing to go down. Hey, man, when the ruling corporate class decided that they wanted to become even more wealthier, what they did, they used race as their ticket to stop helping to contribute to the quality of life in this country for the population as a whole. This is one of the things that bothers me so much about Hillary. Bernie says, yes, state schools, state universities, state colleges, that should be free. Hillary would have, and her crew would have you thinking that, oh, well, that's pie in the sky. No, it's not. Because really, up until the 80s, up until the advent of Ronald Reagan, in many places, that's the way it was. Education was either relatively inexpensive or you didn't have to pay anything at all. Right here in New York City, City University, that was free. That was no tuition. And see, that's one of the things that really aggravates people in the base, because they know, hey, this is BS, because it was like that. One of the things that helped us have such not only a vibrant middle class, unions, and the GI Bill, all the great strides that we made in space and science, most of that was done because the guys who were, they don't have them too much anymore, sold the jerks and pumped gas. And then along comes Pearl Harbor, and these guys are in the Army and the Navy, the Marines. And they come out and they're presented with the opportunity to go to college. In many cases, Ivy League schools, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Dartmouth. And they became our congressmen, our senators. Ask Bob Dole. Ask that gentleman, I can't remember that gentleman's name, the Democrat. He was the Hawaiian gent of Japanese ancestry, who was wounded in World War II. And I believe one of, was the Bronze Star for heroism or a Silver Star? I can't remember. But guys like that, that's what put us really ahead of the rest of the world. And because of greed, because of the need to control, because of the fact that some people who are blessed to be, billionaires, controlling huge corporations, they got the idea that a vibrant middle class was something to be afraid of. And so they have been steadily working to keep the masses of the working people in this country, to keep us down. And that's what the problem is. And it's not race. I mean, it's painted as race. That's one of the things that breaks my heart when I look at the South. You got some white guy, poor as a church mouse, and he's running around talking about, we got to stop them Mexicans and them Latinos at the borders and, all this whack stuff. Listen, there's enough work that needs to be done. And this is the point of what I'm doing here. And I'm going to keep on doing it. because it needs to be said over and over and over again. There's enough work in this country. There's enough things that need to be done for everyone of all colors. And we need to start learning our history and who we are. All of us, black, white, brown, yellow, red, all of us. Because we need to stop this nonsense. And yeah, I dare call it nonsense. This business about the American dream. What we need to start concentrating on is the American reality and what we need to do to get our people here a decent quality of life. A country that is so divided between class, and remember, race is a make-believe concept. Any scientist will tell you that, okay? It is a concept based upon fear, basically, of not knowing, of the difference, of the other. But scientifically, we're all one and the same. And that's how we need to start conducting our politics as a country. Because we don't have the right to intervene in the Middle East, in Africa, Southwest Asia, Latin America. Who the hell are we to go into other countries and talk about democracy when we have done such a terrible job here at home? Yeah, I know, okay, about the problems that they're having in Europe, in Western Europe now. A lot of that is because of the United States. But we are the ones that have basically pronounced that we stand for freedom, justice, democracy, so on and so forth. And we need to start to develop it at home. Donald Trump is not the answer. We ourselves are the answer. We have to start fighting for what we know to be true. We have to start fighting within ourselves to start educating ourselves to what's really going on in the world. We need to bring this country together, not apart. And that's the main point, in my own poor way. I hope I've gotten that point across. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Done. I take it.